"You'll never be more than background noise, Nadia." Those were the words. 7 words. Spoken loud enough for 30 strangers in a mall food court to hear. Spoken by a man in a fitted blazer who thought his job title and his car payment made him somebody. Spoken to a woman in a white linen blouse and flat sandals who didn't flinch, didn't cry, didn't look away. She just stood there, steady, still, like a lighthouse in a storm that didn't know it was a storm. Now let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this before you answer. Have you ever had someone look you dead in the eye and tell you that you would never amount to anything? That you were too quiet, too ordinary, too simple to ever matter? That the life you built with your own 2 hands was something to be ashamed of? Because that's exactly what Garrett Hollis did to the woman standing in front of him that afternoon. He mocked her clothes. He ridiculed her career. He laughed at her wedding ring. He stood in the middle of a crowded mall and tried to dismantle everything she was, piece by piece, in front of anyone close enough to listen. What he didn't know, what he couldn't have possibly imagined, was who was watching from the mezzanine above, standing at the railing. Phone call just ended, jaw clenched, eyes locked on the scene below. And what was about to happen next? It wouldn't just humble Garrett Hollis. It would haunt him, for weeks, for months. For every single time he opened social media and saw the video that 30 strangers recorded on their phones that afternoon. By the time this story is over, Garrett won't just regret every word he said in that food court. He'll regret every word he ever said, and so will the woman standing next to him. But before we get there, before the moment that changed everything, let me take you back, 30 minutes earlier, to a woman with a canvas tote bag and a secret worth more than most people's houses. The mall on a Saturday afternoon was chaos organized by accident. Strollers colliding near the elevator banks. Teenagers clustered in packs outside the sneaker store, all of them on their phones, none of them watching where they were going. The smell of cinnamon pretzels wrestling with department store perfume in the recycled air. Somewhere near the south entrance, a toddler was screaming with the kind of commitment that suggested he'd been at it for a while and had no intention of stopping. Nadia moved through it all like water flowing around stones. Unhurried, invisible by choice. She wore a white linen blouse, olive trousers, flat leather sandals that had molded to her feet over 2 summers of wear. Her hair was pulled back in a low twist. No jewelry except a plain gold. Wedding band on her left hand, brushed matte, no stone. She carried a canvas tote bag on her shoulder, the strap slightly frayed at the edge where it met the seam. She kept meaning to replace it. She never did. It was comfortable. It was hers. That was enough. No one looked at her twice. That was the point. What no one could see, nestled inside that unassuming tote against her hip, was a plain brown box. No logo on the outside. No ribbon. No tissue paper peeking from the edges. Just a box. Inside the box sat a pair of handcrafted cufflinks. Platinum base. Inlaid with tiny slivers of palisite meteorite, 4.6 billion years old. Fragments of the cosmos pressed into something a man could wear against his skin every day. She had commissioned them 11 months ago from a master jeweler in Geneva who accepted only 6 clients per year. The waiting list alone was 14 months. The price tag began at 6 figures. The box had arrived that morning at the boutique satellite counter inside the east wing of the mall, the only pickup location within 200 miles. Roman's birthday was Tuesday. Nadia was already composing the card in her head as she walked. Not the words themselves, not yet. The feeling. She wanted him to open it and feel seen the way he made her feel seen every single day. Not with grand gestures or declarations, but with the quiet precision of someone who paid attention, who noticed, who remembered. Roman never gushed when he received a gift. That wasn't how he worked. He'd hold it first, turn it over in his hands. His thumb would trace the edge of something beautiful before he said a single word, and the silence would say everything. It would move through his face like weather, like light changing on the surface of water. She loved that about him. She loved almost everything about him, but she loved that most. The stillness, the way he experienced the world not by grabbing at it, but by letting it come to him. She was smiling to herself, cutting through the food court toward the east corridor, when the voice hit her like a stone thrown from a passing car. No way, Nadia Vasquez? The name landed wrong. It wasn't hers anymore. Hadn't been for almost 3 years. But something about the way it was spoken, half mocking, half triumphant, like a hunter spotting a trophy he'd mounted and abandoned finding its way back into his crosshairs. Her stomach clenched before she even turned around. She turned anyway. Garrett Hollis stood 6 feet away, leaning against the railing near the fountain with the practiced ease of a man who believed the world was a stage built specifically for him. Fitted blazer over a black crewneck t-shirt. Designer jeans that probably cost $300 and fit like they knew it. A watch on his left wrist that he kept angling toward the overhead lights, making sure the face caught and threw reflections across the tile floor. His hair was styled with the kind of product that looked effortless but required 20 minutes and 3 different tools. He hadn't changed. Not really. A little thicker in the jaw, maybe. A little harder in the eyes. But the performance was identical. The stance that said, "I'm doing well and I need you to know it." The smile that showed teeth but never reached the rest of his face. Next to him, a woman with razor-cut bangs and a quilted designer bag looped over her wrist was mid-sip on an iced coffee, watching Nadia over the rim of the cup with the detached curiosity of someone observing wildlife through glass. Her nails were long, lacquered, the kind of deliberate that signaled she didn't do anything with her hands except display them. "It is you." Garrett pushed off the railing and stepped forward, 2 steps too many. He was inside her space now and he knew it. Wow, 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 wow. Nadia's pulse ticked upward, but her feet didn't move. "Hello, Garrett." "Priscilla, babe." He gestured without looking at the woman beside him. The kind of wave that treated a person like a prop. "This is Nadia, the one I told you about." Priscilla's eyes narrowed, cataloging from the sandals up. Flat shoes, canvas tote, linen blouse, untucked, no earrings, no visible brand. The scan took 3 seconds and rendered its verdict in 4 words. "Oh." A sip of coffee. "The piano teacher." The words dripped with a very specific kind of venom. The kind that came preloaded, rehearsed during pillow talk and brunch gossip. Priscilla didn't just know about Nadia. She had been briefed, given talking points, armed with a caricature drawn by a man who needed his past relationships to be cautionary tales so his current one could feel like an upgrade. "Music instructor," Nadia corrected gently, though she wasn't sure why she bothered. Right. Garrett stepped closer still. His cologne hadn't changed. Still that aggressive, woody, oversprayed thing that used to cling to her pillows for days after he'd been in her apartment. She could taste it in the back of her throat. Memory and nausea walking hand in hand. "So what's new? Still giving lessons to 8-year-olds in that cramped little studio?" Nadia breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth. A technique her therapist had taught her 3 years ago. A technique she hadn't needed in over a year. "I'm doing well, Garrett. Thank you for asking." "Doing well." He repeated it slowly, tasting the words like they were undercooked, like she'd served him something beneath his palate, and he was too polite to spit it out. "Define well." "I'm happy. That's enough definition for me." Something flickered across his face. Annoyance? Frustration? He'd expected something else. A stammer, dropped eyes, the shrinking, apologetic posture he'd spent 2 years training into her. He wasn't getting it, and it threw off his rhythm. So he adjusted, the way he always did. When the first approach didn't work, he escalated. "Happy." He laughed. Short, percussive, designed to sting. "See, that was always your problem, Nadia. Your ceiling was so low you could touch it from your knees. Happy." He said the word like it was a diagnosis. A terminal one. "What does happy buy you? What does happy build?" Priscilla smirked, stirring her iced coffee with a manicured finger. The supporting actress hitting her mark right on cue. And at a table 12 feet away, a woman quietly rotated her phone to landscape mode and pressed record. Now before Garrett says what he's about to say next, and trust me, it gets so much worse. If you've ever dealt with someone who tried to make you feel small, who tried to convince you that who you are wasn't enough, drop a fire emoji in the comments right now. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for Infinite Love Tales by Mr. White, because you do not want to miss what happens when the truth comes out. Garrett Hollis had always been skilled at one thing above everything else. Not his job, though he'd tell you otherwise. Not his relationships, though he'd rewrite that history too. Garrett's singular, practiced, razor-sharp skill was making other people feel insufficient. He didn't do it with fists, never had to. He did it with inventory. He would scan you the way a jeweler examines a stone. looking for every flaw, every inclusion, every tiny imperfection invisible to the naked eye. And then he'd name them, one by one, calmly, almost lovingly, like he was doing you a favor by pointing out everything you lacked. He was doing it now. I mean, look at you. He gestured at her outfit with an open hand, top to bottom, like a teacher presenting a case study in failure. You look exactly the same, exactly, like time just stopped, like the whole world moved forward and you just, I don't know, stayed. Maybe I like where I am. Of course you do. He said it the way a doctor might deliver a prognosis with no treatment options. Kindly, inevitably. You always did. That was the whole issue, wasn't it? He paused, looked at Priscilla, then back at Nadia. The audience check, making sure someone was watching him perform. I kept trying to pull you forward, kept trying to show you what life could look like if you actually wanted something, but you just, he made a gesture with both hands pressing downward like someone pushing against a rising tide, resisted every single time, like ambition was a disease and you were determined to stay healthy. Priscilla laughed, sharp and brittle, like glass cracking. Garrett continued. He was rolling now, feeding off the performance. His voice had gotten louder, carrying past the tables around them, past the smoothie counter, past the pretzel stand where two women had stopped chewing to listen. So tell me, honestly, what do you have to show for yourself, He folded his arms. The interrogation pose. What car do you drive? What neighborhood do you live in? What's your title? Where do you vacation? What's in your savings account? Nadia said nothing. Her silence was deliberate, a wall he couldn't scale. But Garrett didn't need her answers. He had his own, because I can tell you what I've got. He straightened, chest expanding. VP of Development at Kessler Briggs, 3 years ahead of schedule, by the way. Just closed on a unit in Monarch Tower, top floor, corner view. Priscilla's launching a fragrance line in the spring. We're in talks with 2 department stores for distribution. He gestured to Priscilla, who struck a subtle pose. Rehearsed, coordinated, like they'd practiced this in front of a mirror before leaving the house. I drive an M5, just paid it off early. We fly business class minimum. Last month we were in Santorini, the month before that, Tulum. I'm on a trajectory, Nadia, a real one, and you're... He looked at her tote bag, her sandals, the plain gold band on her finger. You're still right here, where I left you. He leaned in, dropped his voice, but not enough, not nearly enough. A dozen people could hear every word. Some people are built for the spotlight, Nadia, and some people are built to watch from the cheap seats. I tried to tell you that. I tried to be honest with you. But you didn't want to hear it then, and from the looks of things, you still don't. He pointed at her wedding band. Plain gold. No stone. No sparkle. You got married? To who? A laugh. Disbelieving. Almost pitying. Let me guess. Another teacher? Some nice guy with a stable job and a modest little house and a 10-year-old Honda in the driveway? Someone who matches your speed, your level? Priscilla bit her lip, suppressing a grin. My husband is a good man, Nadia said quietly. Garrett groaned. Actually groaned. Threw his head back like she'd confirmed his worst suspicion. A good man. That's the kiss of death, Nadia. That's what people say when there's absolutely nothing else worth mentioning. He's a good man. Translation, he's boring, he's broke, but at least he's nice to me. God, you really did settle, didn't you? He shook his head, almost sadly. The performance of concern. The mask of someone who pretends cruelty is kindness, who dresses destruction in the language of tough love. I dodged a bullet, he said, loud enough for the entire food court to hear. I honestly dodged a bullet. At the table to their left, a teenage girl's phone was recording. At the pretzel stand, another phone was raised. Near the trash cans, a man in a baseball cap had his camera up, filming the whole thing. Garrett didn't notice any of them. He was too busy enjoying himself. Nadia stood still, face composed, shoulders straight, eyes level. But underneath, her body remembered. It remembered the way her shoulders used to curve inward when he spoke like this. The way her voice used to shrink to a whisper, then to nothing, then to the silent mantra of, maybe he's right, maybe he's right, maybe he's right, that played on loop behind her ribs like a second heartbeat. Her body remembered the specific posture of smallness, the architecture of doubt that Garrett had built inside her, beam by beam, over 2 years. Every criticism a brick, every comparison a nail, every backhanded compliment a coat of paint over a wall that was designed to keep her contained. And even though her mind had healed, even though she'd done the work, years of it, with a therapist who taught her how to separate his voice from hers. Even though she'd rebuilt herself from the rubble he left behind, her muscles still twitched with the memory. Like a flinch reflex that outlasted danger by years, she remembered the night he left. The apartment, the sound of hangers scraping across the closet rod, him packing methodically while she sat on the edge of the bathtub, mascara dissolving, lungs forgetting how to work. She'd asked him why. Not angry, not pleading, just a question, quiet and genuine, from a woman who thought she deserved at least that much. And he'd stopped, looked at her, set down the shirt he was folding, and spoke. "You'll never be more than background noise, Nadia. I need someone who wants to be the music." Then he'd picked the shirt back up, finished packing, and closed the door behind him with a click so soft it sounded like a period at the end of a sentence. 3 months of silence after. 3 months of replaying every conversation, every dinner where he'd criticized her ambition over pasta, every party where he'd apologized for her being shy when she was actually just thoughtful, every morning where he'd looked at her and she could see the disappointment settling behind his eyes like sediment. She'd believed him. All of it. Had let those words hollow her out from the inside until she was nothing but a shell shaped like a woman, going through motions she couldn't feel. Her softness had felt like a disease. Her contentment had felt like failure. Her gentleness had felt like the weakness he told her it was. For 7 months, she existed, not lived. Existed. And then, one evening, a friend dragged her to a recital after-party at a small gallery downtown. The kind of event where people held wine glasses at specific angles and discussed the artist's intention in voices calibrated to sound both casual and informed. Nadia had drifted away from the crowd, found a painting on the far wall, a Rothko, deep reds bleeding into black, the edges dissolving like the boundary between day and night. She'd stood in front of it for 20 minutes, not analyzing, not forming opinions, just listening. Because that's what Rothko always felt like to her. Not something you looked at, something you heard. She'd been there, alone with the painting, when a voice beside her said 4 words that rewired her entire life. What do you hear? Not, what do you see? Not, what do you think it means? What do you hear? She'd turned. A man stood next to her. Tall, dark suit, no tie, hands in his pockets, looking at the painting with the same quiet attention she'd been giving it. He wasn't performing interest. He was genuinely, deeply still. Grief, she'd said, without thinking, without filtering. Grief that isn't finished yet. He'd looked at her then, really looked, and something in his expression shifted, like a key turning in a lock that had been waiting. "Yeah," he said softly, "that's what I hear too." His name was Roman. One conversation led to coffee, coffee to dinner, dinner to another dinner, another to a walk through the city at midnight where they talked about nothing and everything and the difference between the two, week by week, month by month, the slow, terrifying, extraordinary process of learning to trust again. Roman never asked about her job title, never asked what car she drove or what neighborhood she lived in or where she saw herself in 5 years. He asked what she thought about paintings, what music made her cry, what her favorite word was, and why. He asked about the landscape of her mind, the architecture of her feelings, the geography of her imagination. He fell in love with who she was, not who she could become, not her potential, her. She didn't know who he was, not for weeks, not until a friend at brunch gasped when she mentioned his name. By then, it didn't matter. She'd already fallen in love with the man who stood still in front of a Rothko and asked her what she heard. The empire was incidental. The tenderness was everything. Now she stood in a food court, 5 years and a lifetime from the woman who'd sat on that bathtub edge, and the man who'd broken her was standing in front of her again, trying to do it one more time. He didn't know what had changed. He didn't know who she'd become. He didn't know who was watching. Nadia breathed. In, out. She felt the old ache stir, and she let it. Didn't fight it. Didn't push it down. She'd learned that from 3 years of healing. You don't defeat old pain by pretending it doesn't exist. You defeat it by standing in its presence and refusing to become what it wants you to be. She looked at Garrett, really looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't see the man who'd broken her. She saw a man who was still breaking himself, the constant performance, the inventory of possessions recited like a prayer. The need to diminish someone else to feel elevated. The desperate, exhausting architecture of a life built entirely on the outside because the inside was uninhabitable. She almost felt sorry for him. Almost. "I don't measure my life the way you do, Garrett." Her voice was quiet, even, not defensive, just clear, like still water. "I never did. That's not a flaw, that's a choice." "It's a cope," Garrett shot back immediately. "That's what it is. You're coping with mediocrity by calling it a lifestyle. Believe what you need to." "I believe what I see." He looked her up and down again. "And what I see hasn't changed in 5 years." "Then you're looking at the same thing you were always looking at," Nadia said. "Just what's on the surface, just what you can count and measure and put a price tag on." "Because that's what matters," he said. Like it was obvious, like it was gravity, like the whole world operated on a ledger sheet and she was the only one too naive to read it. "To you," she said. "That's what matters to you." Garrett's jaw twitched. She was refusing to play his game, refusing to fight on his terms. He couldn't win an argument she wouldn't enter, so he went for the throat. "That ring," he pointed at her wedding band. "Plain gold, no diamond, not even a small one. What kind of man puts a plain gold band on a woman's finger and calls it love?" "The kind I chose. The kind you settled for. The kind who saw me," Nadia said, and her voice shifted. Not louder, deeper, from somewhere more foundational. "You looked at me and saw what was missing, Garrett. Someone else looked at me and saw what was there. That's the only difference between you and him, and it made all the difference." The food court had gone quiet. Not completely, but the tables within earshot had stilled. Phones were angled. Eyes were watching. The energy had shifted the way it does when strangers collectively sense that something is happening that matters. And then Nadia felt it, the tiny crack. Not because Garrett's words were true. They weren't. She knew that now. She'd known it for years. But the body remembers. One hairline fracture in her composure, a micro flinch around the eyes, a tightening at the corner of her mouth. Invisible to almost everyone in that food court. Visible to exactly one person. Now Garrett thinks he's won. He thinks he's broken her down. He thinks this is just another ordinary woman, having an ordinary day in an ordinary mall. But what's about to walk around that pillar is going to rewrite every single assumption he has ever made. If you're ready for the moment everything changes, smash that like button right now because this is where the entire story turns. 40 yards away and 1 floor up, Roman Mercer stood at the mezzanine railing of the private lounge, phone pressed to his ear, watching the atrium below without seeing it. The call was wrapping up. Final details on an acquisition his legal team had been structuring for 7 months. 12 hotel properties across 4 countries. The kind of deal that would make the front page of the financial papers next week. The kind of number that most people couldn't visualize, let alone negotiate. He didn't care about any of it right now. He cared about getting home. Lighting the candles Nadia liked, the ones that smelled like fig and rain. Putting on the Coltrane record she'd bought him last month, the one with the scratch on side 2 that added a warmth neither of them wanted to fix. Spending the evening on the couch with her feet in his lap, while she read aloud from whatever novel had captured her that week. Her voice turning sentences into rooms he could walk through. That was his version of ambition. The empire funded it. The woman gave it meaning. "We'll finalize Monday," he said into the phone. "Send the amended terms to Alistair tonight. I want it airtight before the board meets." He ended the call, slipped the phone into his jacket pocket, turned toward the escalator. That's when the voice reached him. Not Nadia's voice. A man's voice. Loud. Performative. The kind of voice that treated public spaces like personal arenas and volume like authority. Some people are built for the spotlight, and some people are built to watch from the cheap seats. Roman's gaze dropped to the atrium floor. He found her instantly. He always could. In any room, any crowd, any sea of faces. Something about the way she stood, the specific tilt of her head, the stillness she carried like a lantern in a world addicted to noise. She was near the fountain, and some man, blazer too tight, cologne cloud visible from 20 feet, was standing inside her space. Leaning in, voice carrying, body language aggressive. Performing cruelty like it was a talent show and he was going for first place. Roman's hand tightened on the railing. His knuckles went white. He descended the escalator in 3 long strides. But he didn't approach. Not yet. He moved behind the broad pillar near the candle shop, 15 feet from the fountain, close enough to hear every word. Close enough to move in a heartbeat if he needed to. He listened. "I dodged a bullet." The man's voice, dripping with self-satisfaction. "I honestly dodged a bullet." Roman's blood turned to something ancient, something that predated civilization and negotiation and restraint, something that lived in the bones and the marrow and the clenched architecture of a jaw that wanted to do damage. Because Roman knew. He knew about this man. Not the details. Nadia had never given him a full accounting, and he'd never pressed. She offered pieces when she was ready, small fragments of a story she was still learning to tell without the shame someone else had glued to it. But Roman knew the shape of the damage. He'd spent 2 years mapping it, feeling its edges in the dark. He knew it from the way Nadia had flinched the first time he complimented her. Actually flinched. Like praise was a trap with teeth. Like kindness was the bait before the strike. He knew it from the way she apologized for crying during a movie. Sorry, I know it's silly." As if emotion was an inconvenience she was inflicting on him. As if feeling things deeply was a deficiency she needed to manage. He knew it from the 6 months it took before she stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. Before she believed, truly believed, bone-deep believed, that he wasn't going to discover who she really was and leave. Roman hadn't just fallen in love with Nadia. He'd fallen in love with her, and then spent 2 years gently, patiently, relentlessly proving that love was safe, that his hands would never build the walls someone else had built, that his voice would never carry the weight someone else's voice had carried. And now that someone else was standing 15 feet away, doing it again, Roman watched Nadia speak, watched her hold her ground, watched her refuse to break on his terms, and pride warred with fury inside him so violently he could feel his pulse in his temples. She was magnificent, had always been magnificent. The fact that this man couldn't see it wasn't a commentary on Nadia. It was a confession about himself. Then Roman saw it. The crack, the tiny hairline fracture in her composure, the micro-flinch around the eyes, the tightening at the corner of her mouth. A tremor so small the entire food court would have missed it. Roman didn't miss it. He'd spent 2 years learning the language of her face. Every expression, every micro-movement, every silent signal that said, "I'm okay" when she wasn't, and "I'm not okay" when she was pretending to be. That crack said, "I'm holding, but it costs me." That was enough. Roman stepped out from behind the pillar. He didn't rush. That was the thing people always noticed about Roman Mercer before they noticed anything else. The way he moved through space. Not fast, not slow. Inevitable. Like a tide coming in. Like a season turning. The kind of motion that doesn't announce itself because it doesn't need to. It simply arrives. He was halfway across the atrium, his stride unhurried and precise, when the mall's concierge intercepted him. She appeared slightly breathless, tablet clutched to her chest, earpiece still transmitting. "Mr. Mercer, sir." She matched his pace, walking beside him. "Your private suite is prepared, and the valet has brought your car to the reserved bay. Also, the general manager wanted me to personally thank you for the Foundation's donation to the children's wing renovation. The plaque installation is scheduled for next Thursday, and he'd be honored if you could attend the—" "Thank you, Elaine." Roman's voice was warm, but final. A closing door upholstered in velvet. "I'll follow up Monday." Her voice had carried. It was designed to be discreet, but Mr. Mercer and private suite and foundation donation traveled across tile and open air like sparks. Heads turned. A woman at the pretzel stand whispered something to her friend. A security guard near the entrance straightened visibly, adjusted his posture, touched his earpiece. At the smoothie counter, the barista's hands stopped mid-pour. Roman didn't notice any of it. Or if he did, it registered with the same significance as the background music. Ambient, irrelevant. He continued walking, past the fountain, past the tables where strangers were watching with their phones angled upward, reached Nadia's side, and without a word, he slid his hand into hers. She looked up, and Roman watched the last trace of tension dissolve from her face, not slowly, instantly, like frost in sudden sunlight, like a held breath released. Her shoulders dropped, her jaw unclenched, her eyes softened into something so private and unguarded that he wanted to build a wall around this moment and live inside it. "Hey," she said softly. "Hey." He leaned down and kissed her temple. Unhurried, deliberate, the kind of kiss that didn't perform for an audience because it had never needed one. The kind that said, I'm here, and I was always here, and no one touches what we've built. Ready? He asked. Almost. She glanced to her left. Just catching up. Roman turned to face Garrett for the first time. He took his time, took in the gel-stiff hair, the cologne cloud, the blazer straining at the shoulders where it was cut half a size too small because he wanted the world to see his gym membership. The watch he kept angling toward the light. The way his arm gripped Priscilla's waist with the specific desperation of a man holding a trophy he was afraid someone might take. Roman let the silence do the work. 2 seconds. 3. 4. An eternity in a food court. Then he spoke. I understand you know my wife. Conversational. Almost pleasant. The way a surgeon might discuss the incision before making it. The transformation on Garrett's face was immediate and total. The swagger collapsed first. The practiced lean against nothing, the tilted chin, the performance of ease. It all dissolved in a single breath. His shoulders pulled inward. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. His eyes moved from Roman's face to his suit, the kind that didn't have a visible label because the people who made it didn't need one, to his watch, which Garrett recognized because he'd spent enough time browsing luxury magazines to know what a Patek Philippe looked like, to his shoes, then back to his face, then to Nadia, then back to Roman, ping-ponging, computing, the math not working, because Garrett knew. Everyone in the city knew Roman Mercer's face. It was on the sides of buildings, not advertisements. The buildings themselves, the ones his company had designed and constructed and watched reshape the skyline over the last decade. It was in magazine profiles and keynote addresses and the quiet, enormous philanthropy that funded hospitals and schools and arts programs across 4 states. Roman Mercer wasn't rich the way Garrett imagined rich. Roman Mercer was rich the way weather was powerful, vast, indifferent to opinion, completely beyond competition. Your, Garrett's voice cracked on the second word. Roman extended his hand, not as a greeting, as a test, a dare wrapped in courtesy. Garrett took it. His palm was damp, his grip uncertain, the handshake of a man who just realized the ground beneath him wasn't ground at all. We used to date. Garrett swallowed hard enough for it to be visible. A long time ago. Roman nodded slowly, absorbing the information like a scientist examining a specimen. She's mentioned you. She hadn't. Not by name, not in a long time. But the flicker of dread that crossed Garrett's face was worth the implication. We were just talking. Garrett's voice had lost all its edges, sanded down to something small and uncertain. I heard. Roman's smile didn't reach his eyes. Something about cheap seats. The color drained from Garrett's face so completely he looked translucent, like someone had opened a valve at the base of his spine and everything that made him solid had simply poured out. Now I know you're feeling this moment right now. If you think Garrett is getting exactly what he deserves, share this video with someone who needs to hear this story today. And stay with me because Nadia is not done yet. Not even close. Priscilla hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. Her iced coffee was sweating in her hand, dripping onto the tile, and she didn't seem to notice. Her eyes were fixed on Roman, with the stunned immobility of a woman recalculating every assumption she'd ever made. Nadia reached into her canvas tote. She withdrew the plain brown box, opened it, slowly, just enough for the overhead lights to catch what was inside. The meteorite fragments caught the light first, ancient, iridescent. 4.6 billion years of cosmic history compressed into slivers no wider than a fingernail, set into platinum so precisely that the boundary between earth and sky disappeared. I was picking up your birthday gift, she said to Roman, tilting the box so he could see. I hope you don't mind that I ruined the surprise. Roman looked at the cufflinks, really looked, and his expression shifted into something private and tender, something that had no business existing in the middle of a mall food court. His thumb traced the edge of the box, and Nadia saw it. That thing she loved, the weather on his face, the light changing. They're extraordinary, he murmured. Then he looked at her, like the woman who chose them. Garrett stared at the box. He couldn't name the jeweler, couldn't identify the specific craftsmanship, but he understood materials. He understood price points, and the math was hitting him in waves, each one larger than the last, each one pulling the floor further from beneath his feet. That's, he started, but the sentence had nowhere to go. Nadia closed the box gently and tucked it back into her tote. They do beautiful work, she said, simply, conversationally, like she was recommending a restaurant. Priscilla's mouth moved. Those stared at. Then she stopped, did the math properly. Her face paled 3 shades. She released Garrett's arm. Not slowly, not subtly. She let go like his sleeve was electric, and she stepped to the side, putting a full foot of distance between them. The alliance fractured in real time. We should go, Roman said. His hand returned to the small of Nadia's back. Protective, possessive in the gentlest way, like a hand on a door you'll never let someone else open. Unless you need anything else, darling. Nadia looked at Garrett one last time. She looked at him the way you look at a room you used to live in. Familiar but foreign. Smaller than you remembered. Full of furniture you'd never choose again. 5 years ago, this man had convinced her she was nothing. Had told her she'd never be more than a piano teacher with simple dreams and a low ceiling. Had walked away from her like she was a draft he'd decided not to send. Had disposed of her with the casual efficiency of someone clearing their inbox. She'd believed him. Had let those words hollow her out. Then she'd rebuilt, brick by brick, note by note, conversation by conversation, until the woman standing here now bore almost no resemblance to the woman sitting on that bathtub edge. Almost. She was still soft, still quiet, still content, still gentle, still all the things Garrett had called weaknesses. She'd just learned they were strengths, the rarest kind. Wait. Garrett's voice came out strangled, small, stripped of every layer of performance until all that was left was a man standing in the ruins of his own cruelty. Nadia, I didn't know. She paused. I mean, if I'd known you were going to, that you'd be somebody. Nadia finished quietly. The food court was silent, not the ambient silence of people eating and scrolling. True silence. The kind that falls when 30 strangers collectively hold their breath. Nadia spoke, not loudly. She didn't need to. Silence carries everything. You didn't need to know, Garrett. That was never the point. She paused. Let it settle. I was always somebody. You just never bothered to look. Garrett's mouth opened. Nothing came out. And, for the record, she tilted her head slightly. The ghost of a smile. I was never background noise. You just never learned how to listen. Roman's hand pressed gently against the small of her back, and they turned. Together, in sync, the way two people move when they've learned each other's rhythms so completely that coordination becomes instinct. They walked toward the private corridor that led to the lower-level parking. Roman's stride matched hers exactly. He didn't rush her, didn't steer her, just walked beside her with his hand on her back saying everything his voice didn't need to. Behind them, Priscilla's whisper sliced through the silence like a scalpel. Do you have any idea who that was? Her voice was shaking. Roman Mercer, the one who built the, oh my God, Garrett. His net worth is, do you understand what just happened? Stop. Garrett's voice was barely audible, gutted. You told me she was nobody. You told me she was some sad little piano teacher who never amounted to anything, and you... I said stop. You just screamed at a billionaire's wife in a food court, Garrett. In a food court, while people were filming. Oh my God. Nadia heard every word, and felt the laughter rising. Not cruel, not vindictive, not triumphant in any performative way. Just the pure, involuntary physical release of something unbearably heavy finally being set down. Like dropping a suitcase you've been carrying up a staircase that never seemed to end, and suddenly realizing you've reached the top. Her shoulders shook. Roman felt it, pulled her closer. You're laughing, he said. I can't help it. Don't stop. It's my favorite sound. They reached the elevator. Roman pressed his palm to the biometric panel, and the doors opened immediately. The car was paneled in brushed steel and warm lighting. Silent as a chapel, the doors closed. The world fell away. Nadia leaned into him, pressed her forehead against his chest, breathed him in. Cedar and clean linen and home. How much did you hear? She asked. Enough to want to take him apart. A beat. More than enough to know you didn't need me to. She looked up. Her eyes were bright. He said I had no vision. Roman's thumb traced her jaw. Slow, reverent, like he was reading Braille written on her skin. You have the most extraordinary vision of anyone I've ever known, he said. You see people, Nadia, not what they have or what they've built or what they can do for you. You see who they are. That's why you stood in front of that Rothko for 20 minutes listening to it instead of analyzing it. That's why I couldn't walk away from you that night. That's why I never will. Her eyes glistened. He made me feel so small. You were never small. Roman's voice dropped. You were just standing next to someone who needed you to be so he could feel big. That's not your deficiency, that's his. She pressed her lips together, nodded, blinked the tears back. For the record, Roman added, and his voice shifted to something lighter, something warm with the edge of a grin. The man drives a finance sedan and lives in a mid-rise condo with a shared gym, and he just tried to lecture you about ambition while you were carrying meteorite cufflinks in a canvas tote bag. The universe has a genuinely spectacular sense of humor. Nadia laughed again. Full, bright, the kind of laugh that fills a room and makes everyone in it want to stay forever. The elevator opened. Roman's driver stood by the car, door already open, posture straight. As they settled into the back seat, Nadia pressed her head against Roman's shoulder and closed her eyes. Roman? Thank you, not for showing up, not for what Elaine said or how you looked standing next to me or any of that. She found his hand, laced her fingers through his. Thank you for the night at the gallery, for asking me what I heard instead of what I did for a living, for making me feel like my answer mattered more than my resume ever could. His grip tightened. It did. It still does. It always will. I know, she whispered. I know that now. In the back seat of the car, as they pulled into traffic, Nadia's phone came alive. Not buzzing, erupting. Notification after notification cascading across the screen like a waterfall she hadn't asked for. Someone had filmed the encounter. Multiple someones. It was already spreading. Tags, shares, comments, reposts. A caption someone had written was gaining traction. She didn't need to say a word. He said it all just by standing next to her. Oh no, Nadia breathed. Roman glanced at the screen. His expression didn't change. Let it breathe, he said. People are going to see a woman who held her ground with more grace than most people manage in a lifetime, and a man who never deserved her learning that lesson in real time. He took her phone gently, set it face down on the seat between them. That's not a scandal, Nadia. That's a public service. She shook her head, smiled despite herself. You're impossible. Impossibly yours. Back at the mall, the food court was returning to its normal Saturday rhythms. Strollers and teenagers and pretzel salt and the ambient hum of lives in motion. But at a bench near the fountain, one man sat alone. Priscilla was gone. She'd called a car, muttered something about rethinking some things, picked up her quilted designer bag, and walked away without looking back. Not even a glance. The fragrance line, the Monarch Tower condo, the Santorini photos, all of it evaporating like perfume on a hot sidewalk. Garrett sat with his hands on his knees, staring at the fountain. The water rose and fell in programmed patterns. Predictable, repetitive, going nowhere. His phone buzzed. A text from a colleague. Bro, that video. You know Mercer Development is our firm's biggest client, right? What were you thinking? Another buzz. His sister, Garrett Thomas Hollis. What is this I'm seeing on TikTok? Another, an old college roommate. Dude, you fumbled catastrophically, like historically. Another, his boss. 4 words that turned his blood cold. My office, Monday morning. He set the phone face down on the bench, pressed his palms against his eyes. Nadia Vasquez. Quiet, gentle, unambitious Nadia. The piano teacher, the background noise. The woman he'd thrown away like a rough draft that didn't deserve a second read. Nadia Mercer now. Wife of Roman Mercer. The man whose company Garrett's firm depended on for their 2 largest active contracts. The man Garrett had applied to work for 3 separate times and been rejected each time. The man who'd just shaken Garrett's sweating hand in a food court and smiled like a man holding a royal flush while his opponent waved around a pair of 2s. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was what Garrett hadn't known. What he could have known if he'd ever bothered to look past the surface of the woman he'd discarded. Nadia Mercer sat on the board of the city's largest arts education foundation. She had personally designed and funded a music program that placed instruments in the hands of 12,000 children across underserved communities last year alone. She'd received a humanitarian award from the governor's office 6 months ago. She still taught private piano lessons, not because she had to, but because she believed that sitting beside an 8-year-old learning to find beauty in sound was the most important work in the world. She was somebody. She'd always been somebody, not because of Roman's money, not because of his name or his buildings or his net worth, because she saw people, truly saw them, the way she'd seen that Rothko, the way she'd seen every student who sat at her piano, the way she'd tried once to see Garrett before he'd made it clear that being seen wasn't what he wanted. What he wanted was to be envied. He'd lost her, had thrown her away like she was nothing, and she'd become everything, not by changing who she was, by finally being allowed to be exactly who she'd always been. The irony burned worse than any insult he'd ever delivered. The fountain cycled on, rising, falling, going nowhere, and Garrett Hollis sat beside it in the ruins of his own performance, finally understanding the difference between a man who builds monuments to himself and a woman who builds doors for others. He had never deserved her, and now the entire internet was watching him prove it. You know, there's a lesson in this story that goes deeper than the twist, deeper than the reveal, deeper than the moment Garrett Hollis watched his entire world rearrange itself in a food court. The lesson isn't that Nadia married a billionaire. The lesson isn't that karma caught up with a man who mistook cruelty for honesty. The lesson is this: your value does not decrease because someone fails to see it. Read that again. Let it settle. Garrett looked at Nadia and saw what was missing. Roman looked at the same woman and saw what was there. Same person, radically different vision, and the difference between those two perspectives wasn't intelligence or taste or ambition. It was character. The people who belittle you are never revealing your limitations. They're revealing their own. Every insult is a confession. Every put-down is a self-portrait. Every time someone tells you you're not enough, what they're really saying is, I don't have enough inside me to recognize what's in front of me. Quiet strength is still strength. Kindness is not weakness. Contentment is not mediocrity. Softness is not a deficiency. The people who mistake these things for flaws will spend their entire lives surrounded by everything and fulfilled by nothing. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person someone threw away becomes the life someone else prays to find. Nadia didn't need Roman's money to have worth. She didn't need his name to have value. She didn't need his suit or his car or his private elevator to prove that she mattered. She'd always mattered. He was just smart enough to notice. So let me ask you something before you go. And I mean this. Have you ever been the Nadia in this story? Has someone ever tried to convince you that who you are isn't enough? That your gentleness was a weakness? That your contentment was settling? That your quiet life was something to be ashamed of? Did you believe them? And if you did, have you stopped yet? Because whoever told you that was wrong. They were wrong then. They're wrong now. And one day, the person who sees you the way Roman saw Nadia is going to stand beside you and wonder how anyone could have ever looked at you and seen anything less than extraordinary. Drop a comment below and tell me what you would have said to Garrett if you were standing in that food court. I want to hear from you. Every single one of you. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story today, someone who's been made to feel small by someone who never deserved them, share this video. Send it to them. Let them know they're not alone. Hit that like button if this story moved you. Subscribe to Infinite Love Tales by Mr. White and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. Because every story we tell on this channel is a reminder. You are always somebody. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. And Garrett Hollis? He spent 5 years believing he dodged a bullet. He never realized he was the one who pulled the trigger. On himself.